Hi everyone. Today I would like to review a role-playing game made by Cubicle 7 based on the Lord of the Rings novels. It's called Adventures in Middle-earth, and it is compatible with the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons system. Cubicle 7 actually released an earlier version of this game called The One Ring, but I think after D&D exploded in popularity with the release of 5th edition, they decided to create a series of these books with the 5e logo there, so that people that are more familiar with the D&D system can play their game. You know, pretty nice pieces of art over here that really, I think they capture the spirit and the flavor of Lord of the Rings. When you get the player's handbook, they have a whole section in here on how to make characters that would be unique to the world of Middle Earth. And I understand why they do this, because there are significant differences. Obviously, there some of the races that exist in traditional D&D don't exist here. There's no tieflings in Middle Earth. There's no dragonborn in Middle Earth. But instead of races, they're actually called cultures, as you can see. And the first one kind of threw me off because I was a little bit confused. But I guess the reason they did this is because you have different types of humans. So instead of just having humans, you have humans from different regions. So you have, for example, Bardings, and these are people from like Lake Town and Gondor. But then you have the Dunedain. Now the Dunedain, that's what Aragorn was. He was one of the Dunedain. Classes are also a bit different. Here is just a list of the classes, and a lot of these are similar to what you might find in D&D. A lot of these are just sort of name changes or skin changes. So you have Scholar, you have Slayer. Slayer is like a barbarian. If you read their abilities, it's almost exactly like a barbarian, except the Slayer can wear heavy armor, which I guess is more in keeping with the Middle Earth theme. Now, what's missing in this book is magic. There are no magic classes. So if you really like playing as a wizard or a sorcerer or something like that, it just doesn't exist as a class option in Adventures in Middle Earth. Now you'll be thinking, well, Gandalf is a wizard. Well, that's true, but if you're familiar with the Lord of the Rings lore, there's actually only 5 wizards in all of Middle Earth. There's Saruman, Gandalf, Radagast, and the 2 blue wizards. So if you want to be a wizard in this setting, you're out of luck. Is that it seems like they take away a lot of things that you would have in D&D instead of giving you things. So, for example, in the Lore Master's Guide, this is basically serves as a Dungeon Master's Guide and also as a monster manual, because there is no book dedicated to monsters. You're really playing with maybe 10 different types of monsters, and most of them are really just different versions of the same monster. So you have a lot of different types of orcs, you have a lot of different types of trolls, a lot of different types of goblins, but they're basically the same. They're basically orcs or goblins or trolls. What I also found to be kind of a big disappointment is that there's actually a lot of monsters that could be in the books that they don't give you the stats for. And I found this really puzzling. So when I wanted to introduce the giant eagle into my game, I basically just used the rock stats. Or you could use maybe like a hippogriff or a griffin. No stats for Ents in this in this game. Now I know that in the Monster Manual there are Trents, which are based on Ents, obviously. So I just basically just took the Trent from the Monster Manual and just put them in the game. But it makes me wonder, why aren't they in this book. Could not find any stats for the Mumakil. And it's weird because when there are so few monsters in the setting, you think to yourself, well, they should try to take advantage of every monster that Tolkien mentions and give you information about that monster, but they don't. And so again, I'm left with doing a lot of the work. If you want, for example, to know what can the Witch King of Angmar do, or what do the Nazgul do, then you need to get the Rivendell guidebook, which is really the main reason I bought this, because I wanted to introduce the Witch King into my game. The Witch King in this book is challenge rating 12, and he's the most powerful creature in the setting. So if you have more powerful characters and they're coming over to the setting, if the final boss is the Witch King, really he's just not strong enough for my existing characters. But I don't think, even if you were to say, well, you're not gonna, I do want to start from scratch. Even if you want to do that, I think that to start some characters from level 1 and to build them all the way up to level 12 is going to be really boring when the only thing they're ever going to fight is orcs and trolls and goblins. I just think that that's going to get old fast. Other characters that should be around in almost any time period, and they're not. So there's no stats for Gandalf, there's no stats for Legolas, there's no stats for Frodo or Bilbo or any of those main characters. They do mention Gandalf in the books, and they say that, okay, the players can run into Gandalf, but because he's such an important character, they don't really want you to use him or to have access to him. And again, this doesn't make any sense to me, because Gandalf, is running around on all these adventures, doing all these different things in the books. So why wouldn't a player want to use Gandalf? Instead of destroying the ring, you go in and you fight Sauron like a big boss. Well, why not have that option? Even though they don't give you the Giant Eagle or the Mumakil or Gandalf or the Balrog, and of course for the Balrog I just use the Balor, which again, I think the Balor is based on the Balrog. So that worked out, that works out pretty easily. But they do give you Elrond stats. And I'm like, well, Elrond, I think, is just as important to Middle-earth lore as Gandalf. So I don't know why they would limit you in that way. And I actually found that it would make more sense to have Gandalf stats and not Elrond, because Elrond doesn't really run around Middle-earth doing things. He pretty much stays in Rivendell, sort of protecting his domain. My favorite thing about this setting, however, is that it gives you a lot of different locations you can use. So it tells you about Rivendell. It tells you about Gondor, about Rohan. It gives you the history of those places. It gives you story hooks that you can use. You get these beautiful maps, which you can see over here. And these maps, this is something that I think you don't get from regular Dungeons and Dragons. And again, if you don't want to use the book for a map, you can actually buy a large fold-out map. And each of these hexagons represents a certain distance that your characters can travel in a day. There's 3 basic tables. There's the embarkation table, of which there are 12 events. 12. Like the one that I just read to you. Okay? There's the 12 events. Then there is the journey events table. And if you look at the journey events table, there is another 12 things that can happen during those journey events. And then finally there is the arrival table, and that's very basic things. For example, I'll read one thing from the arrival table. It says, number 6, grimly determined. The many leagues that the company has traveled have filled them with a sense of clear purpose regarding their goals, dark though the path ahead may be. As a result, the guide will receive a +1 bonus to their next embarkation roll. But then you look at the arrival table, and there's only 8 possible things. So very quickly, you kind of realize as you're playing this that the same numbers come up over and over again, and then it starts to become very, very tedious. especially if you're rolling from this table 3 or 4 times per gaming session. After 3 or 4 gaming sessions, when your characters encounter a fallen log or a rainy day, you're like, oh, it's another of the same thing over and over and over and over again. And this really becomes tedious because the Middle-earth role-playing game, most of what you do in the game is travel overworld. There's not a lot of dungeon delving. There's not a lot of combat. It's a lot of just traveling, and the traveling is interesting, but this makes it very tedious. Now there are other books like the Lore Master's Guide, which actually suggest to you to make your own random tables. But then I'm thinking, well, why am I buying these books if it's kind of telling me to make my own random tables? Like, I kind of feel like they could have expanded and given me a larger, more options. And then you have to roll to basically like a charisma check. And the charisma check is modified by how the different races view each other. And so if you have a bunch of dwarfs in your party and you're going to an elven kingdom, you won't be as well received as if you go to a place where dwarves are better liked. You can't play an evil character. You have to be a good character. But the good character, there's a range of sort of goodness, and that's kind of based on shadow points. And I think the inspiration for this, it's based on the ring, the one ring of power. Sort of how gradually, as Frodo travels from the Shire to Mount Doom, his mind is gradually taken over by the ring. And so that is kind of represented by shadow points. And the way that works is that every time you encounter something that is like evil magic, like an evil magic artifact, an artifact that's cursed, where it has been touched by the shadow, there's a risk of gaining shadow points. And you basically have to make a wisdom saving throw. And if you fail the saving throw, you get a certain number of shadow points based on how powerful the artifact is or how strong the presence of evil is in that area. Another way to get shadow points is if you do something evil. So if you murder someone in cold blood, or if you lie or steal or do something cruel, you can get shadow points. And you can get a number of shadow points equal to your wisdom score. So if you have a wisdom of 10, once you exceed 10 shadow points, then you start to suffer a bout of madness. And the bout of madness affects the game for you. It gives you like disadvantages on certain rolls. And if you continue to get shadow points after that point, you can eventually become evil. And if you become evil, you get taken out of the game. Cubicle 7 really didn't think about the way I think the majority of people will be playing this and will be using these books. Because it's my feeling that the majority of people that play D&D are not going to pick up these books and say, okay, let's make all new characters, let's start from scratch, and we're only going to focus on Middle-earth. I don't think that's what most people are going to do. I think most people are going to do what I'm going to do, which is they're going to want to open up a magic portal from one setting and transport their existing characters into the Middle-earth universe. And unfortunately, there really isn't a lot of information on how to translate from one system to the next. Like how do you go from an alignment-based system to a shadow-based system? What do you do with your characters who are wizards? Like if Gandalf could have just teleported to Mount Doom, then none of the Lord of the Rings story would have been necessary. You could have just, there you are, and just drop the ring. Another thing they do is they actually tell you in the game the time period that you're playing in. So they tell you that the events of your role-playing game are going to be between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Right after the end of The Hobbit, where Erebor is reclaimed, and the city of Dale is being rebuilt. Between that time and the time that Frodo gets the ring, that's what you're playing in. And again, for me, that was very limited because not a lot of exciting or interesting things happened during that time period. And so I thought, well, I think my players, they're going to want to play at a time where they're going to feel like they have, something more interesting to do. I think as a role-playing game, standalone role-playing game, it doesn't really work. But as a campaign setting that exists for Dungeons and Dragons, I think it works okay. But as a DM, you're going to have to do a lot of work to fill in the blanks of how you're going to translate from one system to the next using your existing players. So that's my review. I can't say that I recommend it wholeheartedly. I would give it a B minus. And maybe just get this book. Maybe this is all you really need. Get the player, get the player's guide, and you can peruse the other books. But like I said, you're probably going to be making most of the stuff up yourself. So that's my review, and thank you for watching.